Hello, today's nuts and bolts. I'm going to discuss protecting the work that we do. The first item will be to talk about charcoal drawings. I work a lot in charcoal, as many of you know, mostly with my botanical studies and figure drawings. And the thing about charcoal is that it smears and smudges, so it's really, you gotta be careful if you're going to protect it. Unless you take it right to a framer, that's a whole other story. You get it behind glass and a mat. But even still, with a lot of my charcoal drawings, I like to, quote, fix them. So what am I talking about? Well, there's lots of different brands, but the idea is to spray the charcoal drawing, which I'll discuss, to protect it from smearing and smudging. But it can also protect the work long term in terms of dust, grease, smoke, what have you. And so this is a brand called Workable Fixative. Krylon happens to be this brand. Now, the reason it's called Workable Fixative is that you can spray the drawing, let it dry, and then if you want to keep pushing the values and adding more charcoal, you can do that. And that's so it doesn't smear and smudge while you're working it. That's why they call it Workable Fixative. By the way, when you use this, it's good to use it outdoors or in a very well ventilated area because it is somewhat toxic to breathe this in. And also, I'm always about this distance. What is that? Almost 8, 9, 10, almost 12 inches away. Light spray, perhaps a couple of times. If you get in too close to the piece, it can drip and run and go too dark. So that's just technical, nuts and bolts stuff. Once you do use the Workable Fixative on a charcoal drawing, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to lift out with an eraser for your highlights because it, quote, fixes it. And then when I'm done with the drawing, I actually use this for the final fix as well. It works perfectly well. That's for drawings. But today I really want to spend more time with you discussing how and why we protect our paintings. Now, I've been working with acrylic paintings for quite some time, and that's what I'll be addressing today. For you oil painters out there, there are many products for varnishing your oil paints, but let's discuss briefly why we do this. Well, it protects the piece. It protects it from dust, from dirt, from grime, and what you really want to look for when you're using a varnish is UV resistance, which means that the work is less likely to fade over time. It's not 100% proof, and I always tell folks to keep your artwork out from direct or indirect sun if possible. But it really does protect it long term for those reasons. Now, I've got a bunch of different brands here, and for you oil painters, what I would recommend, I used to work in oils for years, and I prefer Gamblin as the product that I would use. And what I like about Gamblin is the fact that they make great paints. The colors are terrific, but it's also a really good educational site. If you go to gamblinpaint.com or just Gamblin, there is a whole host of videos that you can check out to educate you in the use of oil paints and in this case varnishes. So let's discuss what I've got here. Different brands, most of them make perfectly good varnishes. As I mentioned, Golden is a really good brand. And here I've got Golden varnishes in a spray. Now this is useful if you are working, let's say, with a pastel and you can't brush on a varnish to pastel drawings, but this works pretty well. And it says right here, protective finish, offers good dirt, dust, and moisture resistance, and it's also UV protected archival. So this is if you have a situation where you've got crayons or pastels that are going to smear and smudge, this is a nice varnish to use right from the can. Again, same idea, from a distance. But what we're going to do is we're going to work with this painting here behind me. I'm going to varnish it. I've already done 2 coats. This particular brand from Liquitex recommends 2 to 3 coats, and I'm going to do a 3rd coat just to show you how it's done. Now, in this case, it comes with matte, but it also comes in satin, and it also comes in gloss. I am not a big fan of highly glossy surfaces. And for the longest time, I've been working with matte finish. You see very little shine whatsoever. But lately, to be quite honest, I've been experimenting with the satin varnish. Some years ago, the first time I tried this satin varnish, the first coat, I thought to myself, oh, it's too shiny. But you know what? It really settled down after just a week or two or three. And then I rather liked the way it looks. It had just enough sheen to make the colors really pop. And so I'm gonna use this satin varnish today. I've already done, as I said, 2 coats. This will be the 3rd coat. So this is in liquid form. And then later, I'm going to talk to you about Dorland's wax, which is another way to protect your work and to make the colors pop. All right, so this needs to be shaken. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. I'm going to pour it in this cup. So I have my varnish in here. It's pretty straightforward. We're going to start here. And I'm going to do just one little area right here. I'm going to go in both directions. And I'm going to do a small area at once here.
So you're going in different directions, and I do want to remind everyone that this has been already varnished twice.
Yes.
So you're not running a risk of actually smearing any of the paint.
No. And the paint was, oh, that's the other thing I forgot to mention, which is very, very important. Before I did this, I gave it a wipe with a cotton cloth to get any dust or dirt off of the surface. And I'm looking carefully at the sheen here, making sure that it's that it's not too wet. And you can see it's bringing out the color a little bit. And I just kind of keep going over this area a little bit just to make sure that it's nice and even distribution of this varnish. This will probably be as far as I can go before I'll need to reload the brush right here. Now all this sheen that you see the kind of sheen, Maria and others, that will settle down. All that will settle down. All right. This is Dorland's wax. Now this is another, by the way, this can be used for more than one thing. It says Dorland's wax medium. It has sort of the consistency of Vaseline a little bit. All right, it has that kind of consistency. Some people use it as a medium for painting, and I've done that. If you're doing that, you don't want to use too much of this because it will destabilize the paint. So when I've used it in the past, I might use one part of this to, I don't know, 3 to 4 parts of paint. And it makes for a nice texture and look. Some people look at it as a cheap man's encaustic, which in a way it is. But it's also really nice to use as a way to varnish the piece. It's not the same as the liquid varnish I just showed you, but let me read here from the label if you don't mind. It is, they say, unparalleled as a sealing medium and protective matte top coat. So it does have a matte finish, not glossy per se. So it's a protective matte top coat for paintings, wood, paper, plastic, metal, photographs, and more. For a luster finish, so it has a little more sheen, buff gently once dry. So let me show you how this works. It's pretty simple, it's very simple. Here I have a dry, clean cloth. Take a little onto my cloth here. I'll just choose this area right here. And I work in a circular motion. I think about squares. I'll do this square, then I'm going to come over here and do this square. That way I'm sort of being methodical. So I'm laying it on somewhat thick because I'm going to buff it out and change it. And then redo it. So there's one square right there, just that much. All right. You don't see much difference right now, but if you do this a couple times and then wipe it off and buff it, it will make a difference in terms of protecting, but also the color. It enhances the color just ever so much. All right, this is dried somewhat, and I'm just gonna buff it out, and you can see on the rag. And I'll repeat this a couple of times at least. Now, to be quite honest with you, some people swear that it really enhances the color. I'll be honest with you, I don't think, frankly, it enhances the color that much, but it does leave a slight sheen to the work. But more importantly, it does protect the piece from dirt, from grime, from smoke, what have you. So it is really good for that. And if I turn this in the light, I can see a very slight sheen. So is this as effective to really bring out the color? Is it as effective as what I just did with the satin finish? I'm gonna weigh in on a no. I think the satin finish varnish that I use brings out the color a little bit more, but they do both protect. So some people love this. It's also really great as a medium for painting. You can use it for oil or acrylic. So New Orleans wax. Added bonus to this nuts and bolts, cleaning the brushes. Many years ago, I was actually a house painter in San Francisco for a minute, and they taught me about cleaning brushes back then. So let me share with you a couple things. So this was a brush I used. You can see it's pretty funky, but I used it for gessoing a 3x3 support that I'm about ready to do. So it's got a lot of gesso in there, and I want to make sure that I get most of that out. So what I do is I have this nice wire brush. Now, for you studio painters, in an ideal world, you have an industrial sink. And if you're really fortunate, you've got it in your studio. And that makes a big difference for the trapping of the sediments rather than a regular sink. We do have an industrial sink, but it's in the house, so I take these there. But before I go there, what I do is this. I have a bucket of water here, and I'm gonna run this wire brush through here because a lot of sediment gets up into here, you see. So by doing this, and then I'll do this again under the sink at the industrial sink, but this makes sure that a lot of this will go here first. But if you want to skip this and you have an industrial sink, you can go right to the sink with this, you see. And then I'll take this to the sink, and then when I clean it with soap and water, one more trick that I learned, when you're cleaning this with soap and water, you're bringing it over like this as you're cleaning it with soap and water, and that way you can find out all the color and the paint that's coming out of there. So that's with that. For my more delicate brushes, I have a smaller wire brush, you see. So this was the one I used for, and I'm being much more delicate with this one here. You can see that to get the residue out. Then I'll go clean this with warm water and soap, obviously. Again, when I'm cleaning it, I'll be doing this, and you can see what happens when you do that. It kind of shows you how much color or paint is in there just by doing that. So you're using more soap and more water, and occasionally doing that until you see it run clear. And that's how I clean these brushes. To wrap things up, I want to mention one more food for thought. For those of you out there who, like myself, are mixed media artists, I have a final note of be careful here. So as you can see in this piece here, sometimes I'm working with charcoal pencil. Sometimes I'm working with, this is oil pastel. You see, straight on acrylic paint. Sometimes there might be ink in here. The point here is if I'm going to try to protect this piece here, I am not going to use one varnish for the whole thing. It won't work because I might smear and smudge the charcoal. This oil pastel might be disturbed. So I have to be a lot more careful in this situation where I've got mixed media. In fact, I may not end up varnishing this piece at all for that reason. So each artist is going to be different. You're going to have to address this for yourselves. But just do know that one varnish, like this piece here, for instance, as I told you, has charcoal in it, and it also has pastel pencil in these lines. And so what I did was before I applied the actual liquid varnish, I did come in with the spray and make sure that that's protected. I did that first. And that way I know that when I come in with the liquid varnish, it's not going to smear or smudge the charcoal or the pastel pencil. So take precaution in those regards. All right. The main thing is, if you're really concerned about protecting your work, you do want to choose some kind of varnish, hopefully, and that will protect for years to come, for yourself or for any collectors who are interested in your work.